My name is Emily Carter. I was 38 years old when this happened, and I want you to picture this with me. Imagine spending your whole life fighting to be seen, to be valued. Imagine clawing your way from nothing, building a business, a name, a future, while the very people who should have supported you cut you down, belittled you, and treated you like the family outcast. Now imagine after years of silence, they finally invite you to dinner. A dinner that looks like reconciliation on the surface, but in reality, it's a trap. That night, in one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, my family ran up a bill for $2,200, and then they slid it across the table, expecting me to pay. But instead of giving them what they wanted, I gave them something they never expected. And trust me, you're going to want to hear exactly how it unfolded. Before I dive in, if you love stories of betrayal, suspense, and sweet revenge, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Because what I'm about to tell you, it isn't just a story. It's a warning. My name is Emily Carter. I was 38 years old when this all went down, and by then, I had learned how to wear success like armor. But the truth is, armor is heavy. And when it comes to family, no matter how strong you think you are, their words, their absence, their judgment, they still cut deeper than anything else. I hadn't seen my family in nearly 6 years. Not properly, anyway. Sure, there had been the occasional text on my birthday, always late, always obligatory, a half-hearted Merry Christmas once or twice, but a real conversation, a real gathering, that had ended years ago. And honestly, I thought I preferred it that way. Because with my family, silence was often kinder than their presence. Growing up, I was the odd one out. My mother, Linda, liked things polished, picture perfect. And in her eyes, I was never quite that. Too blunt, too serious, too independent. While other little girls were praised for being sweet or delicate, I was told I was too much, too bossy, too stubborn. Mark, my younger brother by 3 years, was the golden child. He had that effortless charm people fall for. Teachers excused his laziness. Relatives adored his jokes. Even when he screwed up, and believe me, he screwed up constantly, he somehow landed on his feet. My mother shielded him from consequences like it was her life's mission. Then there was Rachel, the baby of the family, 5 years younger than me. She played the role of the fragile one, always needing help, always in some sort of crisis. Broken hearts, broken cars, broken bank accounts, and every time the family swooped in to rescue her. She was painted as sensitive, delicate, the one who needed protecting. And where did that leave me? I was the strong one, the reliable one, the one who didn't need rescuing. The one who was told, "Emily, you'll be fine. You can handle it." And in some twisted way, that label became a cage. Because yes, I handled it. I worked, I studied, I built something from scratch. I became the first Carter to buy her own home without a man's help. I built my own company. I proved myself. But instead of pride, I was met with resentment. When I launched my business, a small marketing agency that eventually grew beyond anything I'd imagined, my mother brushed it off as a little project. When I signed the papers on my condo, her first reaction was, "Don't get too comfortable, dear. Life has a way of humbling people." Meanwhile, Mark was 35 and still bouncing from job to job, often sleeping on her couch, but he was called ambitious. Rachel was 30 and drowning in credit card debt, but she was described as just unlucky. Me, I was the cautionary tale. Too driven, too cold, too independent. So eventually, I stopped showing up. I stopped going to birthdays where I'd be ignored until it was time to take photos. I stopped answering calls that only came when they wanted money. I stopped trying to be part of a family that seemed allergic to acknowledging me. 6 years passed like that. 6 years of distance, 6 years of peace. Until one morning in October, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in far too long. Rachel. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, letting it ring out. But against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was soft, sweet, too sweet. "Rachel," she said, dragging my name out like it was a prayer. "It's been so long. I miss you. We miss you." We, the word, stuck to me like honey that turned sour. Before I could respond, she pressed on. "Mom misses you. Mark misses you. And I think it's time. Time for us to be a family again. How about dinner? Just one night like old times." Something about her tone didn't sit right. It was too rehearsed, too polished. Rachel, the same sister who once called me selfish for refusing to co-sign a loan she couldn't afford, now wanted to see me, out of the blue. "Where?" I asked, cautious. She named the restaurant, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't some family diner. It wasn't a cozy local spot. No, she named one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. The kind of place with velvet seating, candlelit tables, and a wine list that could send someone into debt with a single order. That should have been my first clue. But a part of me, the part that still craved my mother's approval, still longed for my siblings' acceptance, whispered, "What if? What if this really was a chance to heal? What if after all these years they finally saw me?" So I agreed, against my better judgment, against every warning bell ringing in my head, I said yes. And that decision was the beginning of the end. The night of the dinner, I dressed carefully. Not too formal, not too casual. A black dress with clean lines, a blazer, neutral makeup. The kind of look that said, "I belong here. I don't need validation." But my hands still shook as I pulled into the restaurant's valet. The building glittered like a jewel box, glowing against the city skyline. Couples in evening wear stepped out of sleek cars. I felt like an intruder, though I could easily afford it. Inside, the host greeted me with the kind of smile reserved for high-spending customers. "Reservation for Carter?" "Yes," I said. He led me across the room. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above us, casting golden light onto white linen tables. Every chair seemed to hold a secret. And there, near the center, was my family. They were already laughing when I arrived. My mother, Linda, looked radiant in a silk blouse, her silver hair swept into a chignon. Mark leaned back in his chair, whiskey glass in hand, his laugh too loud. Rachel fluttered her hands as she spoke, her bracelets jingling like wind chimes. The moment they saw me, all three faces turned toward me, too quickly, too synchronized. "Emily!" my mother exclaimed, rising with arms open wide. She kissed the air near my cheek. Her perfume clung like smoke. "You look successful." I forced a smile. "Hi, Mom." Mark smirked. Well, well, look who finally decided to come down from her throne." Rachel clasped my hands in both of hers, her voice dripping with syrup. "We've missed you so much." The warmth in her tone felt like a mask. I sat down, my heart thudding. The waiter appeared instantly, sliding menus in front of us. "Shall we start with drinks?" he asked. "I'll take the 18-year Macallan," Mark said without hesitation, as though it were an everyday indulgence. My mother's eyes lingered on the wine list before she closed it with a satisfied nod. "A bottle of the Chateau Margaux, please." Rachel didn't even look at the menu. "Oh, the lobster ravioli appetizer, and maybe the oysters too?" she giggled. I ordered water. That was clue number 1. From the start, there was no hesitation in their choices, no polite glance at the prices, no sign of restraint. It was as if they'd walked into this restaurant knowing exactly what they wanted and knowing they wouldn't be the ones paying. As the evening went on, the food arrived in waves. Platters of seafood, steaks cooked to perfection, desserts that glittered under powdered sugar. And with each course, so did the comments. "So, Emily," my mother began, her tone deceptively light, "still no man in your life?" I swallowed a bite of bread. "No, Mom, still focused on work." Mark chuckled, swirling his whiskey. "Figures. You'd probably scare guys off with that, intensity." Rachel pouted. "I think it's amazing she's independent. I just wish I could be more like you. My life is just so hard sometimes." She sighed theatrically, eyes darting toward me. There it was, the first barb, wrapped in a compliment, a subtle reminder that my role was to be the strong one, the provider, the one who could afford to help. I smiled tightly and kept eating, but inside, suspicion was blooming. Clue number 2 came when the waiter returned with the wine. As he poured, my mother leaned in. "You know, darling, it's really such a blessing to have someone like you in the family. Always so capable." Capable. The word struck like a knife. They didn't want me here because they missed me. They wanted me here because I was useful. The more they drank, the bolder they became. Mark bragged about a business opportunity he was considering, though I knew he'd been unemployed for months. Rachel complained about the rising cost of living, how she was drowning in debt, and my mother nodded along, her eyes occasionally flicking to me, measuring my reactions. Every word was a setup. By the time dessert arrived, my suspicions had solidified into certainty. This wasn't reconciliation, this was theater. And then, the final act. The waiter appeared, silent as a ghost, and placed the leather-bound check at the edge of the table. "Whenever you're ready." Mark didn't touch it. Rachel didn't even glance at it. My mother's hand, steady and deliberate, slid the folder across the table. Straight to me. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said smoothly, her smile tight. "It's so generous of you to treat us tonight." My chest tightened. I opened the billfold. My eyes landed on the total. $2,217. The blood roared in my ears. My palms went cold. This had never been about family. This was an ambush. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't going to play their game anymore. The check sat in front of me like a loaded weapon. $2,217. The number glared up at me, taunting, daring me to react. I didn't speak right away. I let the silence hang, stretching longer, heavier. My family squirmed, though they tried to cover it with fake nonchalance. Mark leaned back, whistling low, as if admiring the restaurant's chandeliers. Rachel picked at her nails, pretending to be absorbed. My mother? She simply smiled, sipping her wine as if she had won. And maybe, in her mind, she had. Because this was the game. I'd seen it before, though never quite this blatant. They wound up the story, set the scene, played their roles, and then passed me the bill, whether literal or emotional. Only this time, the bill wasn't metaphorical. I closed the folder slowly and placed it on the table, my expression unreadable. $2,200, I said quietly. Mark smirked. Well, good thing you're the rich one, huh? Rachel gasped softly, her eyes wide, her tone dripping with false innocence. Oh, Emily, we just assumed, with your business doing so well, this probably isn't much for you. I turned my gaze to her. You assumed. Her cheeks flushed. We thought it would be nice. A gesture. You know, like family. Family. That word again. It was their favorite weapon. They wielded it like a chain. A reminder that no matter how far I ran, I'd always be tethered to them. But I wasn't tethered anymore. Not really. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands in my lap. My mother's smile wavered ever so slightly. She said, Emily, in that tone she always used when she wanted control. It's not unreasonable. You know your brother and sister aren't in the same position as you. And I've sacrificed so much over the years. All we're asking is one nice dinner, one moment of giving back. Her words slithered into me like smoke. I recognized the script. Guilt, obligation, gaslighting. The same tactics she had used when I was younger. Emily, help your brother with his homework. He's not as smart as you. Emily, don't outshine your sister. You know she's sensitive. Emily, be strong for us. You can handle it. Decades of conditioning pressed into a single moment. But the difference now was that I wasn't the same Emily. I had built my own life, my own world. And sitting there, staring at their expectant faces, I felt something shift inside me. I smiled faintly, tilting my head. Interesting, I said. Mark frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said slowly, savoring each word, that this isn't about family. It never was. You didn't invite me here because you missed me. You invited me here because you wanted something from me. Rachel's eyes widened, tears already forming, the kind she could summon on command. That's not true. I just wanted us together again. I ignored her. My focus stayed on my mother. Because Linda Carter was the architect of this little play, and we both knew it. Her eyes hardened, though her smile never slipped. Emily, don't be dramatic. We thought this would be a nice gesture, yes, but if you want to turn it into something ugly, that's on you. And there it was, the turning point. Because for years, I would have folded right there. I would have caved, paid the bill, swallowed my pride, and gone home seething. That was the pattern. That was the trap. But not this time. I picked up the check again, slid it back across the table, and placed it neatly in front of my mother. You invited me, I said calmly, so you can cover it. The effect was immediate. Mark's smirk disappeared, Rachel's tears froze, my mother's smile cracked like glass. What did you say? You heard me, I replied. My voice didn't waver. I didn't order the oysters, or the steaks, or the 3 bottles of wine. I came here for dinner. You came here for a performance. If you want to play the part of a big, happy family who eats like royalty, you can also play the part of the one who pays for it. The table went dead silent. The buzz of the restaurant hummed around us, laughter from other tables rising and falling, waiters gliding past. But at our table, it was war. Rachel sniffled, reaching for my arm. Emily, please, Don't do this! I pulled my hand back. No, Rachel, I've done enough. For the first time that night, I felt light, free. The guilt didn't stick this time. The old chains had snapped. And as my mother sat there, staring at me like I had just betrayed some sacred trust, I realized the truth. I hadn't betrayed them. They had betrayed me. Over and over again. All I had done was finally stop playing along. And that decision was the moment everything changed. The silence at the table was suffocating. My mother's smile had shattered, Mark's bravado had evaporated, and Rachel's crocodile tears had stalled midstream. For a flicker of a moment, I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, letting the tension build. The waiter passed by, glancing at us curiously. I wondered if he could feel the storm brewing. Mark broke first. All right, he muttered, raising his hands. Maybe this place was a bit over the top. How about this? You cover it tonight, and I'll pay you back later. I arched an eyebrow. Like the time you borrowed $5,000 for your startup idea? Or the time you swore you'd cover Rachel's credit card payment? How much of that ever came back to me, Mark? His smirk faltered. That's different. Rachel jumped in, her voice small and trembling. Please, Emily, I don't have the money. You know I don't. If you walk away now, they'll make a scene. They might even call the police. Do you really want that kind of humiliation? And there it was, the red herring, the image they wanted me to fear. Me, dragged out of a 5-star restaurant by security, shamed, humiliated, the successful sister exposed as a fraud. For a heartbeat, I let myself imagine it. I pictured the waiter whispering to the manager, the glances from other diners, my family gasping theatrically as though they were victims of my cruelty. It was a tempting picture, wasn't it? That was their play. They wanted me cornered. Either I paid or I became the villain. But what they didn't realize was, I had already decided. I smiled slowly, folding my napkin and laying it neatly on the table. You're right, Rachel. It would be humiliating for someone, but it won't be me. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? I didn't answer right away. I let my words settle like smoke. Then, with deliberate calm, I waved the waiter over. Ma'am, he said politely, will that be one check or separate? I cut in. My voice was steady, sharp as glass. I'll take mine. They'll handle theirs. For a moment, the whole table froze. My mother's lips parted, but no sound came out. Mark sputtered. You can't do that. They don't split checks here. The waiter glanced at me, then at them, sensing the tension. I'll see what I can do, he said carefully. He left, disappearing toward the kitchen. Mark leaned forward, his voice a hiss. Are you insane? You're going to embarrass us. I tilted my head. Embarrass you, Mark? I didn't order 3 bottles of wine. I didn't order lobster or oysters or whatever else you thought I'd cover. I'll pay for what I ate. The rest is your problem. Rachel's tears returned full force. Emily, please, I can't. I cut her off. Then maybe you shouldn't have ordered it. For once, she had no comeback. My mother finally found her voice, sharp and cold. You've changed, Emily. You think money makes you better than us. But at the end of the day, we're still our family, and family takes care of each other. I met her gaze evenly. Funny. I don't recall you taking care of me. The words hit harder than I expected. Years of swallowed resentment sharpened them like knives. My mother flinched just barely, but I saw it. The waiter returned, setting 2 checks on the table. One small, one monstrous. He placed the smaller one in front of me. Your portion, ma'am. I opened it. $43.75. I smiled, pulled out my card, and slid it in without hesitation. Then I stood. Rachel's voice cracked. "You can't just leave us here." "Oh, I can. And I will." The waiter returned with my receipt. I signed it calmly, thanked him, and slipped my card back into my wallet. My movements were deliberate, graceful, rehearsed, as though I had planned this all along. Because maybe I had. Maybe a part of me, deep down, had known the second I agreed to this dinner that it would end like this. I draped my blazer over my shoulders and looked at each of them in turn. My brother, red-faced and fuming, my sister pouting through her crocodile tears, my mother, her mask of control cracking by the second. "This," I said quietly, "was never about dinner. It was a test. And you failed." And with that, I turned and walked away. Behind me, their voices rose, Mark swearing, Rachel crying, my mother hissing my name like a curse. But none of it touched me. Not anymore. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't their scapegoat. I wasn't their ATM. I wasn't their victim. I was free. And the bill? The $2,200? That belonged to them. Not me. I walked out of that restaurant with my head held high, but don't think for a second that the story ended there. No, if anything, the real mystery began the moment I left them sitting at that table, staring at a bill they had no way to pay. Because later that night, my phone buzzed. First, it was a text from Rachel. "How could you? Do you know what you've done?" Then Mark, "You're going to regret this. You embarrassed us in public." And finally, my mother. Hers was the most chilling. "You owe this family more than you realize. We'll talk soon." The words twisted in my gut. You owe this family more than you realize. What did she mean by that? For hours, I lay awake, replaying the evening in my mind. Something gnawed at me. Something I had missed. And then it hit me. That restaurant, it wasn't just random. Rachel hadn't picked it out of thin air. My mother hadn't accidentally chosen one of the priciest spots in the city. No, this was orchestrated, deliberate. And suddenly, I wondered, was it only about the money? Or was there something bigger lurking underneath? The next morning, I did what I do best. I investigated. I called a friend of mine, a manager at another high-end restaurant. I said, "Do me a favor. Check if anyone from my family's name came up for reservations recently, especially big ones." An hour later, he called me back. "Emily, I don't know what's going on, but your mom's been on a spree. I see multiple bookings, expensive places, all under your name." My blood ran cold. Under my name. The puzzle pieces clicked together. That dinner wasn't just a scam to get me to cover a bill. It was a pattern. They'd been using my name, my reputation, maybe even my business to open doors they couldn't afford. That restaurant bill, it wasn't the first. It was just the first where I showed up. And suddenly, my mother's text made sense. You owe this family more than you realize. She wasn't talking about money. She was talking about leverage. She had been trading on my success, my name, my status, for who knows how long. Anger flared hot in my chest. But beneath the anger, there was something sharper. Fear. Because if they had been signing things under my name, what else had they done? Credit cards? Loans? I had to know. That week, I pulled my credit reports, line by line, and sure enough, there they were. 2 store accounts I had never opened, a personal loan application denied, but still sitting there like a red flag, and the signatures, sloppy imitations of mine. It was them. It had to be. The dinner was just the tip of the iceberg. The $2,200 was nothing compared to what they were really after. Access. To my life. To my resources. To the name I had built for myself. And suddenly, I realized the trap that had been waiting for me. If I had paid that bill quietly, without question, they would have used it as proof. Proof that I had agreed to these little arrangements. Proof that I was willing to bankroll them. But because I didn't, because I flipped the script, their plan unraveled. Still, I couldn't shake the thought. What if this went deeper? What if this wasn't just a family scam, but something legal? Something that could ruin me? That's when I decided. I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to expose them. I called my lawyer. I explained everything. About the dinner, the fake accounts, the forged applications. He listened in silence, then finally said, "Emily, this isn't just family drama. This is fraud. If you want, we can press charges." For a long moment, I sat there in silence. The little girl inside me, the one who had once just wanted her mother's approval, hesitated. Could I really do that? Take my own family to court? But then I remembered the look on my mother's face when she slid that bill toward me. That smug certainty, that belief that I would cave, that I owed her. And the hesitation vanished. "Yes," I told him. "Do it." It was in that moment the second layer of their scheme became clear. This wasn't just a dinner scam. It was identity theft, manipulation, years of using me without my knowledge. And now, it was going to cost them everything. I didn't wait long. The very next weekend, I decided it was time to face them. I drove to my mother's house, an old 2-story place that somehow always felt smaller than it looked, suffocating, like the walls themselves carried the weight of all the unspoken things we never said. When I walked in, the 3 of them were already there. My mother, Linda, sat primly on the couch with her teacup balanced just so, as if this was nothing more than a polite Sunday visit. Rachel perched beside her, twisting her hands like a nervous child, and Mark lounged in the armchair, smirking like he owned the place. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my mother broke the silence. "Well," she said coolly, "look who finally decided to act like family." I didn't sit. I stood in the center of the room, staring at them one by one. "Cut the act," I said. "We need to talk. About the dinner? About the fake accounts? About the loan applications in my name?" The effect was immediate. Rachel's face had drained of color. Mark sat up straighter, his smirk faltering. And my mother? She just sipped her tea, eyes narrowing. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice sharp but controlled. "Yes, you do," I shot back. "I've seen the credit reports. I know you've been using my name. And that dinner? It wasn't about family. It was about baiting me into paying so you could claim I've been funding your little lifestyle all along." Mark slammed his hand on the armrest. "You think you're better than us. You've always thought that, just because you have some fancy job, some money in the bank." "This isn't about my job," I cut him off. "This is about fraud, identity theft. Do you know what could happen if those applications had been approved? Do you know how easily you could have ruined me?" Rachel finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Emily, it wasn't supposed to be like this. We just needed help. You have so much, and we have nothing. Mom said you'd understand." I turned to my mother, my voice low but steady. "You put her up to this, didn't you?" For the first time, Linda set down her teacup. Her mask cracked just slightly. I did what I had to do. You left this family years ago. You abandoned us. And while you were out there building your empire, we were scraping by. You owe us, Emily. Every dollar you've earned is because of the foundation I gave you. Don't you dare act like you don't. The words hit like poison, sharp and deliberate. But instead of breaking me, they fueled me. You owe me? I whispered. Then I laughed, dark and humorless. You belittled me. You excluded me. You let Mark mock me. Let Rachel play the victim while I was blamed for everything. You made sure I knew I was unwanted. And now, after all these years, the only time you call me is when you want money? That's not family. That's exploitation. The room was silent, thick with tension. Then I leaned forward, letting my gaze pierce into hers. And here's the part you don't know. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I've documented everything, the accounts, the applications, even the dinner. What you did was not just cruel, it was illegal. You could go to jail for this. Rachel gasped. Mark muttered a curse under his breath. My mother's eyes flashed with something I hadn't seen before. Fear. You wouldn't dare, she hissed. Oh, I would, and I will, unless you stop this today. Every account in my name, every signature you forged, every scam you tried to pull, it ends now, or the police get everything. The silence stretched. I could see their minds racing, the gears turning, their power slipping through their fingers. Rachel broke first, tears spilling down her cheeks. Please, Emily, I didn't want this to go so far. I just thought maybe if you paid once, maybe it would help. Mark snarled. You're bluffing. You wouldn't ruin your own family. But my mother knew better. She studied me with those calculating eyes, and for once she didn't see the timid little girl desperate for approval. She saw the woman who had built a life on her own terms and who was finally done being their scapegoat. You've changed, she said bitterly. No, I've grown, and maybe if you'd loved me instead of using me, you'd see the difference. I turned toward the door, pausing only once more. This is your only warning. Try this again, and I won't hesitate. You think I'm bluffing? Test me. And then I walked out, leaving them in their silence, their schemes collapsing like a house of cards. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the outsider. I felt like the one in control. I knew walking out of that house wasn't the end. People like my family, they didn't stop because you asked them to. They stopped only when they were forced. And I was ready to force them. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, phone buzzing with messages I didn't answer. I replayed every word from earlier. Rachel's tears, Mark's rage, my mother's venom. And in the middle of it all was one unshakable truth. They weren't sorry. They were scared. And scared people made mistakes. I decided it was time to set the trap. A week later, I invited them to dinner. Same restaurant, same private room. This time, I made the reservation. I told them it was a chance to talk things over. Predictably, they agreed without hesitation. To them, it looked like I was caving, like their guilt trips were finally working. But in reality, I was about to turn the entire table against them. When I arrived, they were already there, dressed to impress, Rachel in a sparkly dress she couldn't possibly afford, Mark in a blazer that still smelled faintly of alcohol, and my mother sitting tall, wearing pearls that gleamed under the chandelier. Emily, she said smoothly as I sat down, I'm glad you came to your senses. I smiled, but there was steel in it. Oh, I came to my senses, all right. We ordered, the same way as before, lavish plates, expensive wine, desserts before the entrees even landed. They leaned back in their chairs, laughing, drinking, indulging as though the whole world was theirs to devour. And I let them. I wanted them comfortable, overconfident. Because this time, the bill wasn't the only thing waiting at the end. About an hour in, when the conversation had turned smug and casual, I gave a little nod toward the doorway. Right on cue, a man in a suit stepped into the room. My lawyer. I had arranged it perfectly. Mark squinted at him. Who the hell is this? This, I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass, is the man who's been helping me piece together everything you've done. Rachel's fork clattered to her plate. My mother's smile froze. The lawyer set down a neat folder on the table and slid it toward me. I opened it, slowly, deliberately, so they could see the stack of documents inside. Credit reports, screenshots of loan applications, even the restaurant receipt from last time with their signatures. You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought you could keep using me, keep milking me like I'm some endless well. But I've kept records. Every fake account, every attempt at fraud, every lie. My mother's voice wavered, though she tried to mask it. Emily, this isn't necessary. We can work this out as a family. I leaned forward, my voice low and dangerous. No, Mom, this isn't family. This is theft. And this, I tapped the folder, is evidence. Enough to put you in court. Mark laughed nervously, though his hands fidgeted. You wouldn't drag us to court. You'd look insane suing your own blood. That's when I smiled. A slow, razor-edged smile that made the air shift. Oh, I won't be the one dragging you. You'll do it yourselves. They stared at me, confusion etched across their faces. Then I pulled out the final piece of the puzzle, a small recording device still glowing red. I recorded everything, I said calmly. The dinner, the confrontation at Mom's house, this entire conversation, every insult, every admission. And guess what? If anything happens to me, this recording and the evidence go straight to the police, automatically. Rachel gasped, covering her mouth. My mother's pearls trembled against her chest. Mark muttered another curse under his breath. You set us up, my mother whispered, voice shaking with a fury I'd never heard before. No, I said. You set yourselves up. I just gave you the rope. You tied the knot. The waiter chose that exact moment to enter, laying the check on the table. The total stared up at them like a ghost from last week's sins. $2,000 and change. I pushed it toward them, calm as ice. Here's the deal. You pay. Every penny. You pay for this meal, you pay back every cent you took in my name, and you promise, on record, that this ends tonight. Or, I paused, letting the silence stretch, I press charges. And trust me, I have more than enough to win. For the first time in my life, they didn't argue. My mother sat stiff, face pale, eyes darting between me and the folder. Mark swore under his breath but pulled out his wallet. Rachel looked like she might faint. And as I watched them scramble to cover the bill they'd once gleefully dumped on me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not because I'd trapped them, but because I'd finally stopped being theirs to trap. As they fumbled with their wallets, their credit cards, their excuses, I sat back in my chair, calm in a storm I had once drowned in. Mark muttered curses under his breath, his face red as he swiped one card, then another. Each declined with a sharp little beep that seemed to echo through the room like a bell tolling. Rachel panicked quietly beside him, whispering about her bank balance, about how she couldn't possibly cover this. My mother? She just sat there, frozen, her pride crumbling in silence as she realized the weight of the hole they had dug for themselves. The waiter glanced at me, but I shook my head. This wasn't my problem anymore. And for once, everyone at that table knew it. Eventually, after what felt like a lifetime of desperation, Mark slammed a crumpled wad of cash on the table. Rachel reluctantly handed over a card. My mother, with hands that shook for the first time in my memory, placed her pearls in her purse and pulled out bills she had clearly meant to hide. Piece by piece, they scraped it together. No laughter now, no smug comments, just silence, broken only by the clink of coins and the scratch of a pen as Rachel signed the receipt. I watched, not with pity, not with rage, but with clarity. This was who they truly were. And this was the first time they were forced to face it. When the waiter finally left, the three of them just sat there, staring at the table like the wood grain might swallow them whole. I picked up my bag, slid the folder of evidence back inside, and stood. "Emily," my mother whispered, her voice brittle, you wouldn't take this to the police, would you?" I looked down at her, at the woman who had spent decades pretending my worth was smaller than her pride. "I already told you, Emmy, I don't need to, because you're going to fix it yourselves. And if you don't, the evidence speaks louder than I ever could." Her mouth opened, but no words came. I turned and walked out. The night air hit me like a baptism. Cool, sharp, clean. For the first time in years, I wasn't dragging their chains behind me. The restaurant lights glowed behind me, but I didn't look back. Not once. In the days that followed, the fallout spread quickly. Rachel called me 3 times in one night, sobbing voicemails about how she didn't mean it, about how she was scared. I never called back. Mark tried the opposite. Furious texts blaming me for ruining the family. Those I deleted without reading past the first line. My mother? She sent one letter, handwritten, short, cold. It didn't ask for forgiveness. It demanded silence. But silence wasn't hers to demand anymore. I gave them 2 weeks. 2 weeks to pay me back for every fraudulent account, every dollar they had siphoned off my name. To my shock, they did. Little by little, checks arrived. Some bounced, but eventually the full amount came through. They weren't apologizing. They were protecting themselves. And that was fine with me. Because the money wasn't the point. The point was power. And I had finally taken mine back. I won't pretend it was easy. Cutting family ties never is. There were nights I stared at my phone, tempted to answer Rachel's cries, tempted to believe my mother's version of family unity. But then I remembered the look on their faces when the evidence hit the table. The fear. The realization. And I knew I couldn't go back. I didn't want revenge to ruin me the way they had tried to ruin me. So I chose something better. I chose peace. I started saying yes to things I had always said no to. A weekend trip with friends, a morning spent painting instead of working, a long, quiet dinner with someone who actually cared whether I laughed or not. I wasn't rebuilding a family. I was building a life. And here's the funny part. The farther I stepped away from them, the more their hold on me dissolved. Their insults, their schemes, their manipulations, they lost their weight. Because deep down, their power had always come from my silence. And I wasn't silent anymore. Months later, I heard through a cousin that Mark had slipped deeper into debt. Rachel had moved back in with my mother. And Linda Carter, the matriarch who once controlled every room she walked into, was now known in whispers for the scandal at that restaurant, the night she was finally forced to pay her own bill. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Because the best revenge wasn't just making them squirm under the weight of their own greed. It was walking away untouched, unburdened, and free. That night at the restaurant was the last time I ever sat at a table with them, and it was the first time I realized something powerful. I hadn't lost a family. I had finally escaped one. As they fumbled with their wallets, their credit cards, their excuses, I sat back in my chair, calm in a storm I had once drowned in. Mark muttered curses under his breath, his face red as he swiped one card, then another, each declined with a sharp little beep that seemed to echo through the room like a bell tolling. Rachel panicked quietly beside him, whispering about her bank balance, about how she couldn't possibly cover this. My mother, she just sat there, frozen, her pride crumbling in silence as she realized the weight of the hole they had dug for themselves. The waiter glanced at me, but I shook my head. This wasn't my problem anymore. And for once, everyone at that table knew it. Eventually, after what felt like a lifetime of desperation, Mark slammed a crumpled wad of cash on the table. Rachel reluctantly handed over a card. My mother, with hands that shook for the first time in my memory, placed her pearls in her purse and pulled out bills she had clearly meant to hide. Piece by piece, they scraped it together. No laughter now, no smug comments, just silence, broken only by the clink of coins and the scratch of a pen as Rachel signed the receipt. I watched, not with pity, not with rage, but with clarity. This was who they truly were. And this was the first time they were forced to face it. When the waiter finally left, the three of them just sat there, staring at the table like the wood grain might swallow them whole. I picked up my bag, slid the folder of evidence back inside, and stood. "Emily," my mother whispered, her voice brittle, You wouldn't take this to the police, would you?" I looked down at her, at the woman who had spent decades pretending my worth was smaller than her pride. "I already told you. I don't need to, because you're going to fix it yourselves. And if you don't, the evidence speaks louder than I ever could." Her mouth opened, but no words came. I turned and walked out. The night air hit me like a baptism. Cool, sharp, clean. For the first time in years, I wasn't dragging their chains behind me. The restaurant lights glowed behind me, but I didn't look back. Not once. In the days that followed, the fallout spread quickly. Rachel called me 3 times in one night, sobbing voicemails about how she didn't mean it, about how she was scared. I never called back. Mark tried the opposite. Furious texts blaming me for ruining the family. Those I deleted without reading past the first line. My mother? He sent one letter. Handwritten, short, cold. It didn't ask for forgiveness. It demanded silence. But silence wasn't hers to demand anymore. I gave them 2 weeks. 2 weeks to pay me back for every fraudulent account, every dollar they had siphoned off my name. To my shock, they did. Little by little, checks arrived. Some bounced, but eventually the full amount came through. They weren't apologizing. They were protecting themselves. And that was fine with me. because the money wasn't the point. The point was power, and I had finally taken mine back. I won't pretend it was easy. Cutting family ties never is. There were nights I stared at my phone, tempted to answer Rachel's cries, tempted to believe my mother's version of family unity. But then I remembered the look on their faces, the fear, the realization, and I knew I couldn't go back. I didn't want revenge to ruin me the way they had tried to ruin me. So I chose something better. I chose peace. I started saying yes to things I had always said no to. A weekend trip with friends, a morning spent painting instead of working, a long, quiet dinner with someone who actually cared whether I laughed or not. I wasn't rebuilding a family. I was building a life. And here's the funny part. The farther I stepped away from them, the more their hold on me dissolved. Their insults, their schemes, their manipulations, they lost their weight. Because deep down, their power had always come from my silence, and I wasn't silent anymore. Months later, I heard through a cousin that Mark had slipped deeper into debt, Rachel had moved back in with my mother, and Linda Carter, the matriarch who once controlled every room she walked into, was now known in whispers for the scandal at that restaurant, the night she was finally forced to pay her own bill. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Because the best revenge wasn't just making them squirm under the weight of their own greed. It was walking away, untouched, unburdened, and free. That night at the restaurant was the last time I ever sat at a table with them. And it was the first time I realized something powerful. I hadn't lost a family. I had finally escaped one.